Well, hello again. Today's footage is going to be the last of the Cottonwood milling from a couple of years ago. The most of the logs have been cut up and transported back home, and there's just a couple more left here to get these last little slabs off of. So what I'm doing at the moment is just using a draw knife to get rid of some of that bark. Although, to be honest, I can't actually remember why I did that. But that's okay. It was good exercise, good practice, however you want to look at that. That ended up all just being piled up in a fire pit so they could enjoy a little bit of the fruits of my labor. I think I set out to get rid of some of the little branch nubs, and I honestly probably just got distracted. That tends to happen a lot. And there's, morning maintenance. You got to double check everything's adjusted correctly, making sure everything's running right, and then take a few minutes to kind of lay things out and figure out the best process that I want to go off of. Trying to basically gauge the kind of get an order of operations for, how smooth things want to go, or how smooth I want the day to go. Especially as I get down to these last few boards, they're kind of a pain because they're thin enough that they are movable, but they're light enough that the saw isn't quite as stable as I work my way down them. So this one these couple actually that are still fairly thick, I'm trying to just see if it's worth trying to get another thick slab, if I can get like another 4x6 out of them, that kind of stuff. And then I think we went over this in a previous video, I'm using the level just as a straight edge. And just drawing a line for me to trace with the edging mill. These most of these turned out to be a 9x9 chicken coop that we have out in our little orchard area, and it was built with the 4x6s on the bottom as a floor structure, and then 4x6 posts in the corners, and I ended up using basically a glue lamb 4x10 for the rafters, but aside from the rafters themselves, in fact all of the rest of the structure is the cottonwood milled from these logs. And the chickens have lived quite happily in there ever since. We've had quite a few. We tried at one point to actually have two different flocks, because we have two different goals that we want out of the chickens. The first goal is as most people, we want eggs. So we need some hens that just are allowed to range and roam and lay their eggs. But the second goal is that we want the meat. And so we actually have a rooster. Since we don't live inside of a city limit, we don't have any bans on that kind of thing. So we've got a rooster that was, well, we had a rooster that was actually given to us because we have some friends that one of their kids likes to raise chickens and ends up with roosters, and one of them was being picked on. He was actually really pretty, kind of just a barn mix. There's no specific breed to him, but he turned out to be an amazing rooster. He wasn't aggressive to anybody. He was really more curious than anything, and he really took care of his flock or his harem. It was the funniest thing. I never was able to give him a treat. Like if I picked up a worm, if I picked up blackberry, whatever it was, if I threw something to him, he'd come over and he'd kind of pick it up and investigate it, and then he would just stand there and cluck. And Emily loves to joke about that. But it really was that he would stand there and he'd go, ladies, look what I've got. I found something for you. I have food for you. And then all the hens would come running over and steal whatever it is. And no matter how many I threw to him, I never once gave him a treat. It was the funniest thing. But he was also very defensive of them. And that's how we ended up losing him last week, actually. We're not sure if it was a weasel or a raccoon are the two running probabilities at the moment. But we actually have another rooster at the moment. We're not sure that he's going to be the same quality. He's not aggressive from what we've seen so far. The hens. So we have 8 hens at the moment, and 7 hens, because we lost one of the hens at the same time as the rooster. So we have 7 hens and 1 rooster, and 3 of the hens are sort of sharing duties. They have a total of 6 chicks at the moment, and I got to tell you, raising chickens with brooding hens versus raising chickens from an incubator is a completely different process, and I don't want to ever do incubator raising again. Buying chicks, from the store, they're difficult to deal with because you have to make sure they're hot enough, but not too hot. You have to make sure you dip their beak in the water so that they know where the water is. That you have to make sure they're eating. You have to do all these things that the mother hen does naturally. And it took the one time we did raise them, when we tried to introduce them to worms, it took quite a while for any of them to figure out. And then once one of them figures out, oh, hey, that might be food, or at least it's something to play with, then others start to clue in and figure it out too. But same thing with kind of, when we introduced them to some scratch grain, it took them a while to figure that out. When we introduced them to, just anything, it would just take them time to figure out, which, it's not unexpected. They've never experienced it. It's a totally new thing to them. They don't know what to do with it. So that part I get. But when you've got a brooding hen, she takes everything she knows and she teaches them. And so every time we've had a brooding hen hatch her eggs, within a day they're out scratching. they never struggle to find food. They never struggle to find water. The only downside that I'm aware of to having brooding hens is that it's an unpredictable number. And Emily came up with the idea that since we have an incubator, what we could try and do is the next time we have somebody that decides to brood, start taking the eggs from her, because the other birds will keep laying, kind of kick them off the nest. So I've got in my head kind of ways to mitigate that. But anyway, so once they start brooding, then we start taking the eggs and just putting them on an incubator. And as long as she has a couple that she can sit on, she'll stay there. But then we put the rest of them on an incubator so that they stay consistent. And then once we leave like a couple there after a day or two of collecting eggs and putting them on the incubator, then we leave the next few there so that when those 2 or 3 hatch and that's what she decides she wants to raise, we can turn around and take the ones that hatched in the incubator just before those and stick them under her and hopefully have a bigger flock that she will then take over and raise. So we'll see if that pans out in the future. The idea that I have, so I've been spending some time over at a friend's property. We traded a equipment trailer frame for some cleaning services, basically, to help clean up his property. And turns out the backhoe tractor could do most of what they wanted. One of the things that I was hoping to get done was actually to demolish an RV, and it's one of those full size, like 40-foot long RVs with like a bus frame kind of a thing. I could not, for the life of me, get that thing moved to where I could get it into a place where I could actually demolish it. I tried the tractor and I tried the truck and I tried. I mean, it's sat in place for so long through so many wet, muddy storms that it's just basically sank in place. So my fear is that it's going to have to be demolished where it is, which isn't a really good spot because there's a lot of trees and shrubs around it that aren't necessarily things that need to, that they want to come down. So I don't know. We'll see. We're hoping to get an excavator at some point in the near future, and so if we do that, I'll be able to hopefully go over there and have more power and more functionality to work on that. But one of the things that was there that I wasn't able to accomplish was there was a camper trailer that had been used to basically store trash in. So it needed to be demolished. And so I was able to do that with the backhoe. And that only took me a couple hours to get that done. So at this point I've got a 27-foot trailer, I think, frame. It doesn't have the greatest axles. It's older, and the axles are only rated at I think it was 2,000 pounds or 1,700 pounds each is what we read on the axle tag, which isn't a lot, but it's big enough that if I, say for instance, put a chicken coop on there, then that would be, I could totally build a chicken coop that would meet that requirement, especially if I end up using cottonwood for a lot of it, because cottonwood, once it's dry, is super, super light. So the thought is that if I build a sectional chicken coop, I could build one section for the brooding hens and the rooster, and then they just live in their own little world, and then I have another coop essentially in another section that can be for the egg-laying hens. That way we could have doors on opposite sides of the trailer, So we set up a set, two different fence areas. Open the one door for, the brooders come out to the left and the egg layers come out to the right, and they each have their own little fenced areas and they don't intermingle, so we don't have to worry about issues with the rooster and whatnot. Then they each go in at night, and whenever we're ready, and once we feel like they've scratched and fertilized and properly and sufficiently handled the ground the way that we want, then we can just pack them up, load up the fences, hook up to it, drive it to a new spot, set out the fences, and the next morning go let them out into their new area, which would be a super beneficial way to do it. And so I'm thinking, what I'm thinking I want to do is inside the brooding box area, each nesting box will actually be 2 sections. So the one will be the typical like little 1x1 nest box that they can hide in, and then as I mentioned, one of the challenges is that other hens will basically kick the brooder off and lay eggs there. And so to prevent that and keep everybody working on their own things, what would happen is once we realize somebody's brooding, then we'll give them a couple of days to let everybody lay eggs there, and then close the front of that nesting box off at night one night, and open the back of it, and then it would have like a 2 foot by 3 foot area, so they can still get out and walk around. It'll have their own food and water in that area, and then we'll make sure we give them treats, some crickets and worms and whatever. But that way, once they decide that they're going to brood, they would be able to just focus on brooding, and the other hens can still wander around and do their thing, and then if they decide, and so each hen would basically have their own nest box or their own brooding area. And then once they hatch, then we open that back up, and they'll be free to go outside and whatever. So I don't know if that'll pan out, but that's kind of the idea that I have in my head. I kind of like the idea, since it's a long enough trailer, I actually kind of like the idea that we would actually put a small pigeon coop on the back end of the trailer also. That's something I've wanted to do, well, since before we moved here, actually. So for like 5 years I've wanted to get into raising some squab. So we'll see. I don't know. I gotta get new tires for it, and then double check that the bearings are all packed and the brakes are all good, rewire it, things like that. So it'll be a while before I get that. I've also got to finish the equipment trailer before I can start working on that one. So who knows? Future projects, future plans. But obviously that's what was on my brain this morning. Watching the milling of this cottonwood, since that's where it's coming from. But this right here, this was the biggest downfall to using this Alaskan mill. The major benefit is the versatility of it. You can go pretty much anywhere and mill just about anything. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could get I think the biggest I've seen is like a 6.5 foot bar, and you can throw a saw head on either side of it, so they're both pulling, and you can cut some pretty massive logs. But man, it goes through fuel. It is not an efficient use of fuel. So I still have it, and I'll still run it every so often just to make sure that there's no problems with it. In fact, I probably ought to go do that today and just let it run dry. But yeah, the main goal of it is going to be, if I have something somewhere that I need to decrease the size of the log to the point where I can properly mill it on the bandsaw. So for instance, I've got some 16 and 20 foot logs waiting to be milled that are going to be trailer decking. So they need to be like 2x8 type size. And a 16-foot cottonwood is a heavy log, and especially these are like 28, 30 inch in diameter, so they're super heavy logs. My little 35 horse tractor cannot lift them. So my thought is that I'll take like a 4-inch slab off the top, and then set the Alaskan mill to 8 inches or so, and then take a couple of 8-inch slabs, which the tractor can move, and then I can set those on their side on the mill, and then mill those down into the 2x8s. So it'll still get its use, and it'll still have some function over the years. It's definitely something, like, I'm super glad I got it. It if nothing else, it got us started early, and it got me to truly value the ease of having a decent capacity bandsaw mill. But sawdust is definitely another, and these glasses that I have at the moment are safety glasses, but they still, sawdust gets everywhere, especially when you're doing that edging, because you've got the cut area of the chain is coming up through the log, so when you're edging, it sprays that sawdust up into the air like a fountain. I'm using some scrap pieces here to help stabilize some of these as I get down to the smallest little sections. Cottonwood's actually surprisingly pretty grain. I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but one of the things that we're probably going to end up using it for is hardwood ceilings, because it's a very pale grain. It does have some interesting character to it, and some interesting coloring and figuring, especially if it's had a little bit of time to spalt, which doesn't take much. But it can actually provide some really pretty color, and since it's so light, once it dries, it would be a very easy thing to put up. So I don't know. It's a resource. It's, you know, it's funny. I get people talking when I'm talking about different woods and whatnot. I get a lot of people who, as soon as they hear that I'm using cottonwood for things, they get all skeptical and iffy, and then there's the other side of the people, or there's the other type of person who, I don't know if you could say, maybe you should say that they understand that wood is wood and all wood is useful, and like, I mean, you know, people like me, I guess you could also say, but people who don't know one way or the other and see, for instance, our little spare room trailer, I've had quite a few people who comment on it that it's a, you know, well, that's a really pretty siding that you've got on it? What type of wood is that? And I tell them that it's cottonwood, and every time they get quite surprised. And then the next question is usually, why do I have such large overhangs on the roof? And well, that's because the siding is cottonwood. You got to make sure the rain doesn't hit the cottonwood, so that I don't have to worry about it being susceptible to rot and moisture. So now that I've got these thinned down, so like this particular board, I'm only cutting like 6 or 8 inches. The cuts go much faster, which was kind of nice, because then I could actually get a couple cuts per tank of fuel. And right here I was just using a screwdriver to just pick off some of the bark and get it out of the way. My theory was that if I'm not going through the bark as much, then the chain will stay sharper. But yeah, you can see here, I'm pretty sure I got 3 passes on that one tank of gas. And I guess these actually look like they might be 2x6. So in other news, we've decided that we're for sure going to divide our property and kind of get things ready to have a spot for my brother and have a spot for us, kind of a thing. So we're starting to see where that's going to go. Talked with the surveyor and kind of worked on a few things. So it'll be interesting to see what the future brings. But we're hoping to make some real progress this in the next little bit, and hopefully have a house by spring at the latest is what we're thinking. So who knows? We'll see. But things have kind of the camper life has just gotten a little too old, shall we say. It's kind of like the living in a camper is like the difference of having an Alaskan mill compared to a bandsaw mill. It's doable. It's something that'll get you by, but it has absolutely worn out its welcome. So you never know. Life just always tends to throw curveballs, and we'll see what that future brings. But we're super excited because this weekend we'll have some family and friends coming to visit and spend some time with us, and then we'll have about a week off from that, and then my daughter will actually be coming out to spend a couple weeks with us, so that's going to be pretty awesome. The goal At the moment, the focus is trying to get the land cleared for that house site. There will be a lot of footage of digging around and pushing over trees and whatnot. And then we'll see where that ends up. But yeah, that's definitely been a big push right now, to make sure we get that done. So we also have started looking at the possibility of harvesting the ash trees from our lower property, because the emerald ash borer was confirmed this year to be up in Vancouver, British Columbia, which means that it's been there for at least a year or two, maybe 3 years even. And since it was confirmed, I guess 2 years ago now, in Portland, Oregon, it's above us and it's below us. It literally, it's just a matter of time before it spreads and it gets over to here. And once it does, that entire forest is going to be infected. And then, I mean, truth be told, it could potentially already be here, and we wouldn't even know it for a year or two, because of the way it lays its eggs, and then the young just live in the tree before they pop out a year or two later. It's kind of a crazy bug. But so we've started looking at that as a possibility. So I don't know. Life will be full of changes, full of challenges. That's just the way it goes. But you know, you just kind of have to roll with it and stay a little bit flexible, and just see where things are at and what you need to do to keep moving forward. That's the challenge. The real challenge is just continuing to move forward, even if it's slow progress. As long as there's progress, then that's what counts. And that'll actually be the funnest thing about this weekend is being able to walk around and show my dad, you know, all the things that have changed in the last year since he was here, because he was out here last August to or was it September? August or September. He was out here to and we set up the sawmill actually, and that's been an amazing change. So it'll be fun to walk around and show him all those differences, and you know, just enjoy the fact that we have the property. Even if it changes over the next few years, we'll see how things go and what life brings. But this is about where the milling for the day ended. Apparently I ended up with some footage of the sun lowering through the trees, so I'm gonna put that on super fast. It was set to 10x and then reloaded again at 10x, so it'll be 100 times faster than what was really there. But I just thought it was kind of fun to see that. So I'm cleaning up everything here, and just gonna load up the last of those logs, and then this is that footage. Now, interestingly, one of the reasons that I've kind of been sold on the DeWalt battery tools is because I had the impact driver that I was using to put screws in at the ends of the boards, and I don't know if I obviously just missed milling, or gathering it up, but as I was cleaning up the last of those boards, I apparently left it on the ground sitting out there. And that was probably 5 or 6 weeks before I was about ready to just go buy a new one because I just couldn't find it. And every time I'd think, okay, well, where did I last use it, or what was I doing? And I couldn't remember. And I'd go search everywhere. I'd search the camper and the truck and the tool shed and the toolboxes, and I was just kicking myself trying to remember where this impact driver was. And then one day I was sending a text to the buddy over there, and it just dawned on me, and I was like, you know what? The last time I actually remember using it was working on those cottonwood logs. So I said, hey, I'm gonna come over. I think I might have left an impact driver out there by those logs. And he sent a text and said, sure enough, there's one sitting out there. So it got rained on for several weeks, and I pulled the battery out, threw it on the charger, put a new battery in it, and it fired right up. And this was 3 years ago now, and it still is working, still is kicking. So that's a good little tool. It's been dropped from the roof 3 times that I'm aware of. The last time I ended up dropping it, I decided, okay, I'm going to take like a 6-foot piece of paracord and tie it around my belt, and then tie it around the handle of the drill. And I haven't dropped it since then for some weird reason. So I don't know if my idea actually is going to be a good thing or not. But yeah, they're good tools. So not that I'm sponsored or anything, but they are built well enough that I can beat the crud out of them, and they still work. So that's where we'll call that for the day, though. Thank you as always for watching. Stay safe out there, and God bless you and yours. I hope you guys are all having a fantastic holiday weekend this weekend.